The midday sun hammered down on Interstate 10 with the kind of merciless intensity that turned asphalt into something close to liquid. Heat waves shimmered across the westbound lanes, creating optical illusions that made the road appear to ripple and bend toward the horizon. Madison Pierce tapped her manicured fingers against the leather steering wheel of her black Range Rover, each tap marking another second slipping away from her carefully constructed timeline. The dashboard had transformed into a Christmas display of warning lights, check engine, temperature, oil pressure, battery, all flashing in chaotic symphony like a slot machine hitting jackpot in reverse. 90 minutes. That was all the buffer she had left between this God-forsaken stretch of West Texas desert and the most important meeting of her 28 years on Earth. $400 million sat on a conference table in El Paso, waiting for her signature, her presentation, her ability to convince a room full of Japanese automotive investors that Pierce Automotive International deserved their partnership more than any other manufacturer in North America. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from this morning's call. "Don't screw this up, Madison. This deal defines whether you're VP material or just another legacy hire playing dress-up in the corner office." The phone in her Birkin bag, $15,000 of hand-stitched Italian leather that cost more than most people earned in 6 months, vibrated with the fury of a disturbed hornet's nest. Text after text. Call after call. Her assistant Jennifer in full panic mode. The lawyers reviewing contracts needed her input, her father demanding status updates, the investor's liaison confirming arrival times, and there she sat, trapped in a vehicle that had chosen today of all days to stage a mechanical rebellion, surrounded by endless miles of scrub brush and sand and absolutely nothing that resembled civilization. Madison had ignored the first warning light 30 miles back. She was running late already, and stopping wasn't in her vocabulary. The second light she'd dismissed as a sensor malfunction. These luxury vehicles were overly sensitive, always crying wolf about minor issues that never materialized into actual problems. By the time the third, fourth, and fifth lights joined the parade, she'd committed to her course. El Paso was close enough. The Range Rover was engineered to handle far worse than a few electronic complaints. She'd pushed through worse situations with sheer determination and refusal to acknowledge limitations. That strategy had served her well through Swiss boarding schools where homesickness tried to break her, through Columbia University where professors expected legacy students to fail, through Harvard Business School where she'd been one of 3 women in her cohort to graduate with highest honors, through Goldman Sachs where 60-hour weeks were considered part-time. Obstacles existed to be conquered, not accommodated. Problems were puzzles requiring the correct application of will and resources. Nothing had ever stopped Madison Pierce when she decided to move forward, until the engine coughed like a dying animal expelling its final breath, until every system simultaneously surrendered, until the vehicle that had cost her more than $120,000 rolled to a pathetic stop in front of a structure that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and wishful thinking sometime during the Reagan administration. Carter Auto Repair, honest work since 1996, declared the sun-faded sign hanging at a crooked angle from a rusted metal post. The letters had been painted over multiple times, each attempt using a slightly different shade of red that didn't quite match its predecessor. Someone had tried to touch up the worst sections recently, creating a patchwork effect that only emphasized the overall deterioration. The building itself, calling it a building felt generous, consisted of weathered red brick showing dark water stains from decades of whatever passed for rain in this climate. Oil puddles had seeped so deeply into the concrete apron that they'd become permanent features, fossilized evidence of 1,000 repairs conducted in this space. Peeling paint revealed layers of previous color choices like geological strata. A calendar from 2019 clung to one exterior wall, its image of a classic Chevrolet and a woman in a bikini both faded to ghost versions of their former vibrancy. Exposed electrical wiring snaked along the roofline in clear violation of every building code Madison could imagine. Tools hung from bent nails, their handles worn smooth by decades of use, their metal surfaces showing more rust than original finish. The entire operation looked like something preserved from another era, a museum exhibit demonstrating how Americans fixed cars before computers and diagnostic equipment and climate-controlled service bays. Madison sat in her disabled vehicle for a long moment, staring at this monument to everything she'd spent her adult life escaping. Small towns, small ambitions, small people content with small lives. The air conditioning had died with the engine, and heat began infiltrating the cabin with aggressive efficiency. Her white Armani silk blouse, $1,200 at the boutique in downtown Houston last month, started adhering to her skin with uncomfortable persistence. Sweat formed along her hairline despite the professional blowout she'd gotten yesterday specifically for this meeting. Her perfectly applied makeup felt like it was melting, sliding down her face in slow motion. She had no choice. The realization landed with the weight of absolute defeat. No other buildings existed in either direction as far as the eye could see. No cell signal out here in the digital dead zone. No ride-share services operating in the middle of nowhere. No options except swallowing her pride and dealing with whatever backwater mechanic operated this establishment. Madison stepped out of the Range Rover with deliberate slowness, as if the very act of touching this place might contaminate her. Her Louboutin heels, red-soled proof of taste and means, $1,100 that announced her status with every step, sank slightly into the oil-stained ground. The mixture of ancient grease and desert dust created a consistency somewhere between solid and liquid, and she felt it grip her expensive shoes with something approaching malice. The smell hit her immediately. Gasoline fumes mixing with burned motor oil and hot metal and something organic she couldn't identify, but that made her stomach turn. She pulled a silk scarf from her bag, Hermes, naturally, and covered her nose and mouth like a surgeon preparing for an operation in unsanitary conditions. The temperature had to be pushing 112 degrees. Heat radiated from every surface, creating a physical pressure that made breathing feel like work. Madison's pale skin, maintained through religious application of Swiss creams and monthly dermatologist visits and strategic avoidance of direct sunlight, prickled with immediate protest. She could feel her shoulders starting to burn, despite the supposedly all-day SPF 50 she'd applied this morning in her climate-controlled penthouse bathroom overlooking Houston's skyline. "Hello?" Her voice carried across the empty lot with sharp impatience. "Is anyone here? I need help immediately." Silence answered. Just the whisper of desert wind across sand and the distant sound of 18-wheelers on the interstate. Madison felt her irritation climbing toward genuine anger. What kind of business left itself unattended during business hours? What kind of operation didn't even have the courtesy to post hours or contact information or any indication of human presence? Then a figure emerged from the depths of the garage, materializing from shadows like something summoned rather than simply arriving. A man, perhaps 38 years old, though hard living made precise age difficult to determine. He wore navy blue coveralls that had once been that color, but now existed as a canvas of accumulated stains, black engine oil, rust-colored transmission fluid, silvery streaks of grease, brown smudges from God knew what. The fabric had been washed countless times but remained fundamentally marked by the work conducted while wearing it. His hands showed the topography of manual labor, calluses thick as leather, scars mapping old cuts and burns, permanent grease embedded in every crease and fingerprint despite obvious scrubbing. Dark eyes assessed her with calm that felt almost unsettling in its steadiness. His face was weathered from years under the Texas sun, skin tanned to the color of worn saddle leather. Crow's feet spread from the corners of his eyes. Not from laughter, Madison suspected, but from squinting against brightness and heat while working. His dark hair showed streaks of gray at the temples, premature aging from stress or genetics, or both. Everything about him spoke of exhaustion, of years piled on years, of a life spent in service to engines and customers in circumstances beyond his control. "Afternoon, ma'am." His voice carried no particular inflection, neither hostile nor welcoming, just professionally neutral. "What can I do for you?" Madison pointed at her Range Rover with a theatrical gesture designed to communicate both the vehicle's importance and her own exasperation. "My truck broke down. I need it repaired right now, immediately. I have a crucial meeting in El Paso and I cannot waste time in a place like this." She paused, letting her gaze travel across the garage with barely disguised contempt. "So I need you to work fast, very fast. Do you understand?" The man walked toward her vehicle without responding to her tone. His work boots, soles separating from leather in places, laces replaced multiple times with different colors, left faint prints in the oil dust mixture coating the ground. He moved with economy of motion, no wasted energy, approaching the Range Rover like a physician approaching a patient. His hands, despite their scarred and stained appearance, touched the vehicle with surprising gentleness as he released the hood latch. Steam rose from the engine compartment when he opened it, heat distortion creating wavering air patterns above the expensive machinery. He leaned into the mechanical depths, his head disappearing into the space between hood and frame. Madison could hear him working, touching wires, shifting hoses, listening to sounds she couldn't perceive. His fingers moved with practiced confidence, testing connections and checking fluid levels and diagnosing problems through methods that appeared more instinctive than analytical. Madison stood with arms crossed, one hip cocked in a posture her mother had always criticized as unladylike, but which she'd perfected during her years in Manhattan boardrooms. It communicated impatience, superiority, and barely controlled irritation all at once. Her heel tapped in a regular rhythm against the concrete, each click marking seconds being stolen from her rapidly diminishing timeline. The phone in her bag continued its desperate vibration. She could imagine Jennifer's messages growing increasingly frantic, could picture her father's anger building with each unanswered call, could see the Japanese investors checking their watches, perhaps beginning to question whether Pierce Automotive deserved their $400 million if the VP couldn't even arrive on time. 5 minutes passed. The sun climbed higher, heat intensifying. Madison's blouse was now thoroughly soaked with sweat, her makeup definitely running, her carefully styled hair losing its structure in the humidity and heat. Everything about her appearance that she'd calibrated so precisely this morning was deteriorating in this God-forsaken place. The mechanic finally straightened, closing the hood with careful precision. He wiped his hands on a rag that was somehow dirtier than his hands, accomplishing nothing except redistributing grease from one surface to another. When he spoke, his voice remained that same careful, neutral tone. "It's the mass airflow sensor and a cooling system hose that burst from excessive pressure. Been showing symptoms for a while, I'd guess. You probably ignored the warnings." He paused, and Madison bristled at the implicit criticism. "The hose is completely destroyed and the sensors burned out. I've got the parts here. Universal high-quality components that work perfectly on your model. It'll be ready in 15 minutes. Guaranteed." The words hung in the superheated air like a physical presence. Madison felt something shift in her chest. Not quite laughter yet, but the precursor to it. 15 minutes. This man standing in his grease-stained coveralls in his falling-apart garage in the middle of nowhere had just told her he could accomplish, in 15 minutes, what the certified dealership with their million-dollar diagnostic computers couldn't manage in 3 days. The laughter started small, just a slight exhale of disbelief. Then it built, growing in volume and cruelty until it echoed off the brick walls and corrugated metal roof. Not the polite laughter she'd learned in finishing school or perfected in corporate meetings. This was raw and mocking, loaded with every ounce of condescension she could summon. She removed her Chanel sunglasses, limited edition, $800, purchased in Paris last spring, to look directly into his eyes, wanting him to see the contempt in her expression. 15 minutes. She repeated the words like they were the punchline to history's funniest joke. You, a backwater mechanic working in this dump, are telling me you'll fix a $120,000 Range Rover in 15 minutes? Her voice climbed in volume and venom. The heat, the stress, the ruined timeline, the sheer indignity of being stranded here. All of it poured out in a torrent of class-based fury she'd been taught since birth was her birthright to express. The certified Range Rover dealership in Houston, with their state-of-the-art diagnostic computers and specialized tools that cost more than this entire property, couldn't even diagnose the problem correctly in 3 full days. She stepped closer, invading his space, using her height and heels to look down at him despite his actual stature. And you seriously expect me to trust my vehicle? A machine with technology more advanced than anything you've probably seen in your entire life? To someone who can't even keep his work clothes clean? She gestured broadly at the garage, her arm sweeping to encompass every failure and inadequacy. Look at this place. It's literally about to collapse. Look at yourself. She pointed at his coveralls with a perfectly manicured nail. You're covered in filth. Your tools look like they belong in a museum. This whole operation is a joke. Madison felt something dark and ugly flowing through her, every cruel thought she'd ever had about people she considered beneath her crystallizing into words. Do you have any idea how ridiculous you sound? 15 minutes? To fix what trained professionals at an authorized dealership couldn't? You're either delusional or you're running some kind of scam, and either way, I'm not interested in... She stopped mid-sentence because the man had done something unexpected. Instead of defending himself or arguing or showing any reaction to her abuse, he'd simply looked down at his coveralls. Really looked at them, as if seeing them for the first time through her eyes. His hands, those scarred, calloused, permanently stained hands, clenched slowly into fists. Knuckles whitened with tension. Veins stood out along his forearms under the rolled-up sleeves. His jaw worked like he was grinding teeth or swallowing words. But he said nothing, didn't defend his skills or his shop or his integrity, just stood there absorbing her contempt with a silence that felt more powerful than any response could have been. And in that silence, Madison saw something in his eyes that made her laughter die in her throat. Not anger, not hurt, something deeper and more disturbing. An ancient sadness, a bone-deep weariness, and beneath it all, a flicker of recognition that sent an inexplicable chill down her spine despite the 112-degree heat. Ma'am, the word came quietly with devastating calm. I'm just telling you the truth. Something about the way he said it, the careful control in his voice, made Madison look at him more closely. Really look. Past the grease and the coveralls and the setting, the strong line of his jaw, the particular way he tilted his head when thinking, the depth in his dark eyes. A sense of familiarity tugged at her consciousness like a half-remembered dream. Do I? She hesitated, uncertainty creeping into her voice for the first time since arriving. Do we know each other from somewhere? Your face looks familiar. The man turned away from her, facing the distant horizon where heat created mirages that made the desert appear to shimmer and flow like water. A smile crossed his face, not amusement, but something bitter and loaded with pain poorly hidden. The expression transformed his features in a way that strengthened that nagging sense of recognition without quite bringing it into focus. No, Miss Pierce. Her name from his lips startled her. She hadn't introduced herself. You definitely don't know me. You've never known I existed. but I know exactly who you are. I know everything about you." The words fell between them like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that spread in widening circles of implication. Madison felt her skin prickle with something that wasn't just sunburn. Unease crawled up her spine, primitive and insistent. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. How did he know her name? What did he mean he knew everything about her? "What the hell does that mean?" Her voice came out sharper than intended, fear masquerading as aggression. "Are you threatening me? Because I swear to God, if you're some kind of stalker—" He shook his head slowly, that sad smile lingering. "Nothing like that, ma'am. It's just that your life and mine are connected in a way you never bothered to discover, in a way you probably don't even remember." He paused, and the silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. "Because for people like you, people like me and my family, are invisible. We exist only when you need us. We disappear when we're no longer useful. Explain yourself right now." Madison heard the edge of panic in her own voice, hated it, couldn't control it. "What exactly are you talking about? How do you know my name? How do you know anything about me?" The mechanic walked slowly back toward the shadowy interior of his garage, shoulders carrying weight that seemed to press him down toward the earth. He stopped at the threshold between brutal sunlight and relative darkness, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice sounded like it traveled from somewhere very far away, from a place of pain so deep that words could barely reach it. "Madison Elizabeth Pierce." The use of her full name without honorific or title felt like a violation, intimate and wrong. 28 years old, born March 15th, only daughter of Robert Pierce, CEO of Pierce Automotive International, valued at approximately $2.3 billion. He recited facts like reading from a file. Graduated Stanford University, Harvard Business School with honors. Currently, Vice President of Business Development, on track to become youngest executive VP in company history. Each word landed with physical impact. Madison's heart hammered against her ribs. Her mouth went dry despite the heat. This wasn't public information. Well, some of it was, but the casual way he strung it together, the specific details, this was knowledge that felt invasive, threatening. Lives alone in a $4 million penthouse in downtown Houston. 4,000 square feet with panoramic views of the city skyline. Drives this Range Rover, custom ordered, delivered 6 months ago. His voice remained steady, emotionless, delivering information like testimony in court. Engaged once, 3 years ago, to Marcus Whitmore, called it off 2 months before the wedding. No current romantic relationships. Works 70-hour weeks. Father's favorite. Mother's disappointment for reasons you've never fully understood. "Stop." Madison's voice cracked with genuine fear now. "How the fuck do you know all that? Who are you?" He turned slowly, and she saw tears gathering in his eyes. Actual tears threatening to spill down his grease-stained cheeks. His voice, when he spoke again, trembled with emotion barely contained. "I'm the son of Sarah Carter." The name detonated in Madison's mind like a bomb designed specifically to destroy her equilibrium. Sarah. The syllables unlocked a flood of memories she'd apparently walled off so effectively she'd forgotten they existed. The workshop, the desert, the broken-down Range Rover, the crucial meeting in El Paso. All of it faded into background static as her brain attempted to process what he'd just said. He continued, relentless, each word a carefully placed cut. "The woman who worked as live-in housekeeper for your family for 27 years. The woman who raised you and your brother Christopher like her own children. The woman who made your breakfast every morning, packed your school lunches with little notes tucked inside, helped you with homework your parents were too busy to assist with, taught you how to braid your hair, held you when you cried over boys and bullies and bad grades. Madison's world had stopped rotating. Everything, time, breath, thought, suspended in the moment of recognition. Sarah Carter. The memories came rushing back with brutal clarity, each one a fresh indictment. Sarah with her warm smile and gentle hands. Sarah singing softly while folding laundry. Sarah making the best chicken pot pie Madison had ever tasted, even better than the fancy restaurants her parents favored. Sarah waiting up on Friday nights when teenage Madison came home late from parties, not to scold but to make sure she got in safely. Sarah celebrating every small achievement like it was the Olympics. Sarah's laugh like wind chimes in summer breeze. Sarah's hugs that somehow made everything feel manageable. She died 3 years ago. The mechanic's voice cut through her reverie like a blade. Alone in County General Hospital. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer that she'd ignored for months because she didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to ask for help, didn't want to trouble anyone. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. She spent 2 weeks dying in a county hospital bed because she couldn't afford better care. And do you know who visited her? Who sat beside her in those final days? Who held her hand when she took her last breath? Madison couldn't speak. Her throat had closed. Her lungs weren't working properly. Nobody from your family. The words fell like hammer blows. Not you, not Christopher, not your mother or father. I called your house 3 times, left messages with whoever answered, some new housekeeper, I guess, because Mom had been gone for 6 months by then. Please tell Mr. Pierce that Sarah Carter is very ill. Please tell the family. Do you know what happened? She shook her head mutely, though she could guess, could remember her father dismissing some message about old staff, could remember not even pausing in her day to consider what it meant. Nothing. No callback. No flowers. No card. Nothing. His voice broke completely now, tears flowing freely. She died with only me holding her hand. Her last words were about you and Christopher. Tell Madison and Christopher I loved them. Tell them to be good people. Tell them I'm proud of them. Those were her final thoughts. Not her own son who'd been there for everything, but the children she'd raised who couldn't be bothered to visit. Madison felt her legs giving out. She slumped against the Range Rover's door, expensive metal supporting her weight as emotional impact accomplished what physical exhaustion never could. Her vision blurred with tears she hadn't cried in years, maybe decades. Designer mascara ran in black streaks down her cheeks. The silk blouse now sported dark patches from crying, mixing with sweat. She was my mother. Owen, because now Madison understood this was Owen, Sarah's son, the boy she'd heard about in passing but never met, never thought to meet, spoke through his own tears. Who broke her back working 14-hour days so she could send me money for school? Who missed my 8th grade graduation because your family needed her for some dinner party? Who missed my high school football games because your mother wanted the house perfect for garden club meetings? Who turned down my invitation to my high school graduation because your parents decided to take you kids on a spontaneous trip to Aspen and she had to go along to watch you? Each memory he shared was another weight added to the crushing guilt settling over Madison's shoulders. She remembered that Aspen trip, remembered being 8 years old, bored in a ski lodge, complaining that there was nothing to do, had never once considered that Sarah being there meant she was missing something important in her own life. Do you have any idea what it's like being a kid and having to share your mother with rich strangers? Owen's voice climbed with years of accumulated pain finally finding release. Seeing her 1 day a week, Sunday, her only day off, while you got her attention every single day? Watching her leave Sunday night to go live in your house, sleep in your servants' quarters, Wake up to make your breakfast while I ate cereal alone at my grandmother's house? The garage seemed to tilt around Madison. She'd never thought about Sarah having a life outside their household, had never considered that the woman who'd been such a constant, comforting presence in her childhood had a son somewhere waiting, wanting, needing his mother. Sarah had just been there. Part of the household machinery, like the furnace or the security system, noticed when not functioning, ignored when everything ran smoothly. She worked for you from the time I was 8 years old until I was 35. Owen wiped his face with the useless greasy rag, creating dark smears across his cheeks. 27 years of her life. 27 years watching your children grow up, mature, become successful adults while her own son waited in the background. Do you know what she told me when I complained, when I said it wasn't fair that you got more of her time than I did? Madison shook her head, unable to produce words through the constriction in her throat. She said you were good kids, that you treated her with kindness, that you had good hearts under all that privilege. He laughed, but the sound held no humor. She said someday when you grew up fully, when you matured, you'd understand the value of people like her. People who give everything without expecting anything except their paycheck, and maybe a thank you at Christmas. The words struck like physical blows. Madison remembered Christmas bonuses, her father handing Sarah an envelope every December, a perfunctory gesture performed with the same enthusiasm as tipping the mail carrier. Had never considered that maybe Sarah deserved more than a check. Had never thought to get her an actual gift, something personal, something that acknowledged her as human rather than employee. I told her she was wrong about you. Owen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Told her you were just using her like everyone uses domestic workers. That for people like you, we're simply replaceable labor. That you'd forget her the moment she stopped being useful. He looked directly into Madison's eyes. I desperately wanted her to prove me wrong. Wanted to believe that her sacrifice meant something. That you were worth it. The unspoken question hung in the air between them. Were you? Madison had no answer. The evidence suggested not. The woman who'd loved her, truly loved her in ways her own mother never quite managed, had died alone and forgotten. Had spent her final conscious moments thinking about Madison and Christopher, hoping they'd become good people, while neither of them had cared enough to visit or call or even send flowers to her funeral. I didn't know. The words came out as broken whispers. I swear to God, I didn't know she'd died. Nobody told me. I was in New York closing a deal, and She trailed off, realizing how pathetic the excuse sounded. We got the messages. I remember my father mentioning something about old staff needing something. I didn't ask, didn't follow up, didn't care enough to find out what it was about. Does that matter? Owen's question cut through her attempted justification. You didn't ask, didn't care. 27 years of service, and you couldn't be bothered to spend 5 minutes finding out if the woman who raised you was okay. That tells me everything I need to know about what her life meant to you. What she meant to you. The truth of it settled over Madison like a burial shroud. He was right. She'd been too busy, too focused on her career, too wrapped up in deals and meetings and climbing corporate ladders to spare even minimal thought for the woman who'd packed her lunches and braided her hair and held her when she cried. Sarah had been erased from Madison's life the moment she stopped being immediately useful, discarded like outdated software or last season's fashion. She never complained. Owen's voice softened slightly, though pain remained sharp beneath the gentler tone. Not once in 27 years. She always defended you kids, said you were good deep down, that you'd been raised in a bubble but had kind hearts. She believed in you right up until the end, Died believing she'd made a positive difference in your lives, that her sacrifice had meaning. He paused, and when he continued, his voice cracked with naked emotion. I need to believe she was right, that her sacrifice wasn't completely wasted, that somewhere under all your money and privilege and corporate ambition, there's the little girl she loved, the one who cried when her goldfish died and Sarah held a funeral in the backyard, the one who secretly donated her old toys to homeless shelters even when your father said it gave the wrong image, the one who Sarah saw and loved. Madison sobbed openly now, not caring about appearance or dignity or any of the things that normally governed her public presentation. Tears flowed in rivers down her face, carrying expensive makeup with them. Her silk blouse was ruined, her hair had collapsed. Her carefully constructed exterior had crumbled completely, leaving only raw grief and crushing guilt. The desert wind picked up slightly, carrying the smell of sage and hot sand. Traffic sounds from the distant interstate provided white noise backdrop to this moment of devastating revelation. The sun continued its relentless assault, heat radiating from every surface. And Madison Pierce, vice president of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, sat crying against her disabled luxury vehicle while facing the consequences of callousness she'd never bothered to examine. Owen stood silently, giving her space to process, to grieve, to begin comprehending the magnitude of what they'd done, what she specifically had done, in forgetting Sarah Carter so thoroughly. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Madison found her voice. It came out hoarse and broken, nothing like her usual confident boardroom tone. "I'm sorry. I know that means nothing now. I know those are just words that can't undo anything. But I'm so sorry. You're right about everything. We were selfish, cruel. We treated her like furniture, like part of the house. And when she wasn't there anymore, we just moved on. Didn't even wonder where she'd gone or if she was okay. We're terrible people. I'm a terrible person." Owen nodded slowly, acknowledging the apology without quite accepting it. "Mom left something for you. She kept it for years, hoping someday she'd have the chance to give it to you personally. But that day never came." He turned toward the garage. "Wait here." He disappeared into the shadows, leaving Madison alone with her guilt and the scorching Texas sun and the wreckage of her carefully maintained self-image. She looked at her phone. 43 missed calls, dozens of texts, the digital manifestation of her old priorities screaming for attention. The meeting in El Paso, the $400 million deal, the career-defining presentation. All of it seemed suddenly, startlingly meaningless compared to the depth of failure Owen had just revealed. She'd spent 28 years building toward success her father would recognize, climbing ladders her mother would approve of, accumulating achievements that looked impressive on paper. And in the process, she'd become exactly the kind of person who could forget someone like Sarah Carter, someone whose love had been unconditional and whose sacrifice had been total, and whose memory deserved so much more than the casual erasure Madison had granted it. The phone buzzed again. "Jennifer." "Madison, where are you? The investors are asking, and your dad is furious. Please respond." Madison stared at the screen, at the manifestation of the life she'd built, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, like a structure that had stood for decades suddenly revealing hairline cracks that ran all the way to the foundation. Owen emerged from the garage carrying an old shoebox, worn at the corners, tied with a faded pink ribbon that had once been vibrant. He held it carefully, reverently, like it contained something infinitely precious. When he handed it to Madison, their fingers touched briefly, her soft, manicured hands meeting his rough, scarred ones, and she felt the full weight of the gesture. She kept this hidden, Found it after she died, going through her things. His voice was gentle now. The anger burned out, leaving only sadness. It has your name on it. I think she wanted you to have it. Madison's hands trembled as she untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside lay her childhood in fragments and moments she'd forgotten existed. Photographs, dozens of them, showing her and Christopher at various ages, always with Sarah in the frame. Birthday parties where Sarah smiled from the background. Christmas mornings where Sarah watched them open presents. First day of school photos where Sarah had clearly been the one holding the camera, though someone had later taken one with her in it. Every image captured Sarah looking at them with unmistakable love. The kind that doesn't require blood relation or legal obligation. The kind that simply exists because someone has chosen to give it. Beneath the photographs lay letters. So many letters. All addressed to Madison in Sarah's careful handwriting, the script she'd perfected in rural Texas schools before economic necessity had derailed her dreams of becoming a teacher. None of them had been sent. All of them had been kept, accumulated over years, a one-sided correspondence from a woman who'd loved someone who never wrote back. Madison lifted the first letter with shaking hands, and Owen turned away, giving her privacy for this moment. She read, and with each word, each sentence, each paragraph, the person she'd been for the past decade crumbled a little more. And in the brutal heat of a West Texas afternoon, surrounded by the smell of engine oil and desert sage, Madison Pierce began to understand the true cost of her success. The first letter was dated 10 years ago, when Madison had turned 18. Sarah's handwriting flowed across the page with careful precision, each letter formed with the deliberateness of someone who'd learned penmanship as an art form rather than a utilitarian skill. My dearest Madison, today you turned 10, and I watched you blow out the candles on that beautiful 3-tier cake from the bakery your mother loves. You closed your eyes so tight, like you were making the world's most important wish. I made a wish too, standing in the corner of the dining room where I'd set up the decorations. I wished that you never lose that sparkle in your eyes, that special light that makes you different from other children born into wealth. The world will try to harden you, sweet girl. It will teach you that kindness is weakness and compassion is liability. Please don't let it take away what makes you truly you. With all my love, Sarah. Madison's vision blurred as tears fell onto the paper, smudging ink that had sat undisturbed for a decade. She remembered that birthday, remembered the cake, chocolate with raspberry filling, decorated with edible flowers, remembered her friends from the private academy, their gifts wrapped in expensive paper, had no memory whatsoever of Sarah standing in the corner, of Sarah making wishes, of Sarah seeing something in her worth protecting. The second letter came from 5 years later, Madison at 15. Itanita. The nickname stopped Madison's breath, a term of endearment she'd completely forgotten. Today, I saw you arguing with your father in his study. You wanted to donate all your old clothes and toys to the children's shelter downtown. Your father said the Pierces don't engage in public charity because it creates expectations and attracts the wrong kind of attention. I heard you crying in your room afterwards, so angry at the unfairness of having so much while others have so little. But then this morning, I found 3 garbage bags hidden in my car trunk. Your winter coat from last year. Those boots you'd only worn twice. Boxes of toys you'd carefully selected. You'd written a note. Sarah, can you please take these to St. Vincent's on your next day off? Don't tell Dad. That's the heart I pray God protects in you. That instinct to help even when you're told not to. That rebellion against cruelty dressed up as propriety. The memory surfaced with painful clarity. Madison had been furious that day, disgusted by her father's cold calculation about charity and image management. She'd acted in defiance, in anger, in teenage rebellion against parental authority, had never considered it particularly noble or meaningful. But Sarah had seen it differently, had recognized in that small act of teenage defiance something worth celebrating, worth preserving, worth writing about years later. Letter after letter revealed a version of Madison she'd forgotten existed. At 16, struggling with an eating disorder she'd hidden from her parents but couldn't hide from Sarah, who'd quietly left supportive notes in her lunch bag and never once shamed her. At 17, heartbroken when her boyfriend cheated with her supposed best friend, finding comfort not in her mother's platitudes about fish in the sea, but in Sarah's steady presence, her willingness to simply sit and listen. At 19, terrified about leaving for college, feeling inadequate compared to her brilliant older brother, receiving encouragement from Sarah that meant more than her parents' expectations. Each letter was a mirror reflecting someone Madison had stopped being. Someone who'd cried at sad movies and rescued injured birds and stayed up late worrying about homeless people sleeping in winter cold. Somewhere between Stanford and Harvard and Goldman Sachs and Pierce Automotive, that person had been systematically dismantled and replaced with someone harder, sharper, more focused on winning than on being good. The letter from her 22nd birthday hit differently. My beautiful Madison, today you graduated Stanford with highest honors. I watched from the back row. Your family had front row seats naturally, but I clapped the loudest when they called your name. My heart felt like it would burst. You don't need an old housekeeper's pride. You have your father's approval, your mother's satisfaction, your professor's recognition. But I'm proud anyway, beyond words. You've worked so hard. You've earned every achievement. Just please, as you step into this new chapter, remember that your worth isn't measured by your accomplishments. It's not found in your degree or your job offers or your starting salary. Your worth is in who you are when nobody's watching, in how you treat people who can't do anything for you, in whether you remember the girl who wanted to help hungry children even when she was told it wasn't appropriate. Madison pressed the letter against her chest, physical pain radiating through her ribs. That graduation day had been triumph and validation. Her father had actually smiled, had told her she'd made him proud for the first time in memory. Her mother had introduced her to influential friends as my daughter, the Stanford graduate. The celebration dinner had cost thousands, champagne flowing freely, everyone congratulating her on joining the elite ranks of top university graduates. Not once had she looked for Sarah in that crowd. Not once had she wondered if Sarah was there, if Sarah cared, if Sarah's opinion mattered at all. The final letter, written just before Sarah's retirement, carried weight that made the previous ones seem light by comparison. The handwriting was shakier here, less controlled, as if written by hands that had begun to fail their owner. My precious Madison, you're 25 now and starting your big career at Pierce Automotive. Your father announced it at dinner last week when I was serving. Vice President Track, Executive Suite, the future of the company. I'm so proud, even though I know you don't need an old housekeeper's pride anymore. You have the pride of men in boardrooms and women in corner offices. But I'm proud anyway. I'm retiring next month. My bones are tired, sweetheart. My back aches from years of bending and lifting. My hands don't grip as well as they used to. It's time. But I want you to know, before I go, that raising you was the greatest honor of my life. Greater than any achievement I could have claimed for myself. You were the daughter I got to borrow for a while. Remember, always, your worth isn't in your money or your success or your title. It's in your heart. Don't let the world make you forget who you really are underneath all the trappings. The little girl who cried when birds flew into windows. The teenager who smuggled charity donations in my car. The young woman who called me at midnight from college just to hear a familiar voice. Don't forget her, Madison. She's the best part of you. With all my love forever, Sarah. The date on the letter was 3 months before Sarah's cancer diagnosis. 3 months before her world had collapsed into hospitals and treatments and pain. Had she known something was wrong when she wrote this? Had she felt death approaching and wanted to leave these words behind? Or had this simply been a farewell from someone who'd loved Madison since infancy and wanted to mark the end of their official relationship with something meaningful? Madison's sobs came in waves that shook her entire body. Her designer clothes were ruined beyond salvage, tear-stained, sweat-soaked, wrinkled into permanent creases. Her makeup had migrated to her neck and collar, her hair hung in damp strings. Every carefully maintained element of her professional appearance had dissolved, leaving her looking like someone who'd survived a natural disaster. Owen stood at a respectful distance, allowing her privacy while remaining present. His own eyes were red from crying, though he'd composed himself somewhat. He'd lived with this grief for 3 years, had processed Sarah's death alone while Madison had been closing deals and networking at industry events and climbing corporate ladders, completely unaware that someone who'd loved her unconditionally had slipped out of the world without her noticing. "I don't deserve this," Madison's voice came out raw and broken. "I don't deserve any of it. Her love, her letters, her pride. I became exactly what she was afraid I'd become. Everything she warned against in these letters, that's who I am now. Empty, arrogant, measuring people's worth by their bank accounts and job titles, using people and discarding them when they're no longer useful." Owen moved closer, his work boots scuffing against oil-stained concrete. "You can still change. Mom believed people can change right up until their last breath. She believed in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility of becoming better." His voice carried careful hope, fragile as spun glass. "She always said it's never too late to be who you want to be. Never too late to choose differently." Madison looked up at him through tear-swollen eyes. Really looked at him for the first time since he'd emerged from the garage shadows. The resemblance to Sarah was unmistakable once you knew to look for it. The same warm brown eyes, though his carried sadness Sarah's had never shown in Madison's presence. The same strong jawline. The same way of tilting his head slightly when listening intently. The same fundamental gentleness despite hard circumstances. This man, covered in grease, working in a falling-apart garage in the middle of nowhere, was Sarah's son. The child she'd raised primarily through absence, loving him from a distance while loving Madison up close. He'd grown up with Sunday visits and phone calls and money orders, while Madison had gotten daily presents and packed lunches and bedtime stories. The unfairness of it struck Madison with physical force. "Tell me about her." The request came out as plea rather than demand. "I realize now I knew Sarah for 27 years, but I never really knew her. Where was she from? What did she love? What were her dreams before everything?" Owen hesitated, measuring whether Madison deserved this information, whether sharing his mother's story with someone who'd forgotten her so completely was betrayal or honoring Sarah's belief in second chances. Finally, he gestured toward the garage office, a cramped space visible through the open bay door. "Come inside. I'll make coffee. Mom always said the best conversations happen over coffee." The office was exactly what Madison expected from the exterior. Small, cluttered, functional. A battered desk held invoices and parts catalogs. An ancient coffee maker sat on a filing cabinet that had probably been purchased used in the 80s. Photographs covered one wall, a collage of memories spanning decades. Madison recognized Sarah in many of them. Younger versions showing the woman she'd known alongside images from before Madison's birth. Sarah as a teenager, beautiful and bright-eyed. Sarah holding infant Owen, exhausted but radiant. Sarah and Owen at his elementary school graduation, her in her housekeeper's uniform because she'd come straight from work. Owen busied himself with the coffee maker, the ritual giving him time to gather his thoughts. Madison sank into a cracked vinyl chair that wheezed under her weight. The air conditioning consisted of a box fan in the window, pushing hot air around without actually cooling anything. But after the scorching heat outside, even circulated hot air felt like relief. Mom was from a small town in southern New Mexico, place called Hatch, famous for chili peppers, not much else. Owen's voice carried the cadence of someone telling a story he'd heard so often it had become part of his own memory. Her daddy was a farm worker, moved around following crops. Her mama worked in the packing plants. She was number 12 out of 12 kids. You can imagine how much money a family like that had. Madison couldn't imagine, actually. The concept of 12 children in one household, of parents working in fields and packing plants, of moving constantly for work. All of it existed in a reality so distant from her experience, it might as well have been fiction. She was the only one who finished high school. The only one who learned to read real well, write proper. She wanted to be a teacher. Owen poured coffee into mismatched mugs, hands steady despite the emotional weight of the conversation. Got accepted to New Mexico State University. Had it all planned out, education degree, come back to teach in communities like the one she grew up in. Make a difference for kids who needed someone to believe in them. The coffee smelled burnt and overbrewed, nothing like the artisanal blends Madison consumed from her $500 espresso machine. She accepted the mug anyway, wrapping her hands around it despite the heat, needing something to anchor her to the present moment. Then she got pregnant at 19. My father, Owen's voice hardened, was a guy passing through town for seasonal work. He vanished the second she told him, left her alone, scared, with a baby coming and dreams dying. Her family couldn't help. They barely had enough to feed themselves. So she dropped out of college and took whatever work she could find, cleaning houses, watching kids, anything that paid cash and didn't ask too many questions. Madison thought of her own life at 19. Second year at Stanford, living in an apartment her parents rented for her. Allowance generous enough to cover expenses and entertainment. Her biggest concern had been whether to join the business fraternity or focus on academic clubs. The idea of being pregnant, alone, with no support system and collapsing dreams, it was incomprehensible. She worked for a cleaning service in Scottsdale for a few years. That's where your mother found her. Owen settled into the desk chair, which creaked alarmingly. I was 8, living with my grandmother in Hatch because Mom couldn't afford childcare and work full-time. Your mother offered her a live-in position, triple the salary she was making, health insurance, stable hours, a room in your house, everything she needed to build a better life for me. So she said yes. Madison could see the decision from Sarah's perspective now, the impossible choice between being present for her own child and providing financially for his future. She said yes, Owen confirmed. Moved to Houston, sent me money every week so Grandma could buy me school supplies and clothes and food. Saw me on Sundays, her only day off. Every Sunday morning she'd drive 4 hours to Hatch, spend the afternoon with me, then drive 4 hours back to be at your house Monday morning. 8 hours of driving for maybe 6 hours of actual time together. Week after week, year after year, choosing highway miles over being present, choosing Madison's daily care over her own son's. The mathematics of sacrifice made Madison physically ill. She never missed a Sunday unless your family absolutely needed her for something. And even then, she'd call me. We'd talk for hours sometimes, her telling me about her week, me telling her about school. His voice softened with memory. She talked about you and Christopher like you were hers too. Madison learned to tie her shoes today. Christopher won the science fair. She was so proud of everything you did. The coffee tasted as bad as it smelled, but Madison drank it anyway. Deserved the bitterness. What were her dreams? The question came quietly. After she gave up teaching, after she started working for us, what did she want for herself? Owen was quiet for a long moment, staring into his own mug like answers might surface in the murky liquid. She wanted to see me graduate college, wanted to be there when I got my degree, to prove that even though she couldn't finish her own education, she'd raised a son who could. His jaw tightened. She got a full-ride academic scholarship to Texas A&M when I was 18. Mechanical engineering program. Full tuition, books, housing, everything covered based on my grades. Madison felt dread building in her stomach. You didn't go. I went for 1 semester. Owen's hands gripped his mug hard enough that Madison worried it might shatter. Then she got sick. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer, diagnosis so sudden it felt like being hit by a truck. The doctors gave her 6 months to a year with aggressive treatment that insurance would only partially cover. Treatment that cost more than she'd saved in 20 years of sending me money and living frugally. The pieces assembled into a picture more devastating than the individual parts suggested. You came back. I came back. He nodded. Dropped out of A&M, moved into the house she'd bought here. Small place, nothing fancy, but hers. Took over this garage from the guy who'd owned it before. Worked every hour I could to pay for her treatments. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental drugs we had to fight insurance to cover, hospital stays, home health aides, all of it. Madison understood now why he'd been so angry. Understood the specific edge to his pain. Sarah had worked for 27 years to give him opportunities she'd never had. Had sacrificed daily presence in his life so he could attend good schools and have stability, and eventually earn that scholarship. And when she'd needed him most, when cancer had stolen her future, he'd abandoned his own dreams to care for her. The cycle of sacrifice had continued into the next generation. She lived 18 months after diagnosis, longer than anyone expected. Owen's voice grew distant, remembering. The last 6 months were hard, really hard. Pain that medication couldn't quite touch. Weakness that made everything difficult. But she never complained. Never said it wasn't fair or asked why this was happening to her. You called our house. Madison remembered now, or rather remembered not remembering. Her father mentioning something about former staff needing something, dismissing it as not their concern. 3 times, Owen confirmed. Left detailed messages. This is Owen Carter, Sarah Carter's son. My mother is very ill with cancer. She worked for the Pierce family for 27 years. I thought they'd want to know. I gave my number. Asked for a callback. Told whoever answered, some new housekeeper, younger woman I didn't know, that it was urgent. Nobody called back. Nobody called back. His eyes met hers, and in them Madison saw the full weight of that abandonment. I told myself you were busy. Important people with important jobs. Maybe the messages never reached you, but deep down I knew. You'd moved on. Mom's service was complete. Her usefulness had ended. Why would you care about what happened to her after that? Madison had no defense. The truth was exactly as brutal as Owen suggested. Her father had dismissed the messages as not their problem. And Madison, busy with her own ascending career, hadn't questioned it. Hadn't considered that maybe former staff deserved basic human consideration. Hadn't wondered if Sarah was okay, or needed anything, or wanted to hear from the children she'd raised. She died on a Tuesday. Owen continued, relentless. County General Hospital because we'd exhausted our savings on treatments and couldn't afford private care anymore. She shared a room with 3 other patients. The nurses were overworked and understaffed. But she was grateful anyway, thanking everyone for everything, apologizing for being trouble. Madison's throat closed around a sob she couldn't quite suppress. Her last words were about you and Christopher, not about me, the son who'd been there through everything, not about her own regrets or pain, about the kids she'd raised who never came. Owen's voice cracked. She said, "Tell Madison and Christopher I love them. Tell them to be good people. Tell them I'm proud of them." Those were literally her last conscious words before she slipped into unconsciousness and died 4 hours later. The garage office felt too small suddenly, walls pressing in, air too thick to breathe properly. Madison set down her coffee mug before she dropped it. Her hands were shaking too violently to hold anything safely. "I didn't deserve her love." The words came out as broken confession. "I don't deserve to be remembered in her last moments. I don't deserve these letters or her pride or anything she gave me. I took everything she offered and gave nothing back. I'm a monster." "You were a child when she started working for your family." Owen's voice gentled slightly. "A baby. You didn't choose the dynamics that made her raise you while I grew up with my grandmother. You didn't create the economic system that made her have to choose between being present for her own son and providing him a future. Those weren't your decisions. But forgetting her was my decision." Madison wiped her eyes roughly. "Not keeping in touch after she retired. That was my choice. Not wondering where she went or how she was doing. That was conscious neglect. Not responding when you called. That was cruelty I could have prevented if I'd cared enough to try." Owen didn't argue. Couldn't argue. Because she was right and they both knew it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief and regret and the weight of a wasted opportunity to honor someone who'd deserved better. Outside, the afternoon sun continued its relentless assault on the desert landscape. Traffic hummed on the distant interstate. People going places, living lives, unaware of this small moment of reckoning happening in a failing garage. Finally, Owen stood. "Let me fix your truck. That's what I said I'd do. And Mom taught me to keep my word." He paused at the door. "It really will be ready in 15 minutes. I don't make promises I can't keep." Madison watched him return to her Range Rover, this man who'd given up his dreams to care for his dying mother, while Madison had been networking at cocktail parties and negotiating contracts and building a career Sarah would have been proud of but would never know about. The injustice of it burned in her chest like acid. She stayed in the office, surrounded by photos of Sarah's real life, the life that existed outside the Pierce family home. Sarah at Owen's elementary school play, in the audience clapping. Sarah at what looked like his middle school graduation, beaming with pride despite the housekeeper's uniform she'd worn straight from work. Sarah teaching young Owen to ride a bike, hands steady on the seat, smile encouraging. Sarah on her single day off, wearing jeans and a casual shirt instead of her work clothes, looking younger and freer than Madison had ever seen her. In all these photos, Sarah looked happy, tired sometimes, worn down by circumstances and hard work, but genuinely happy. Madison tried to remember if she'd ever seen that exact expression on Sarah's face during work hours at the Pierce house. Couldn't recall it. Sarah at their home had been professional, pleasant, caring, but this unguarded joy in these photographs had been reserved for her time with Owen, for the one day a week when she got to just be mom instead of the help. The sound of the Range Rover's engine starting pulled Madison back to the present. She checked her watch. Exactly 15 minutes since Owen had walked away. He'd made good on his promise, just like he'd said. Unlike Madison, who'd promised Sarah in childish ways that she'd always remember her, always appreciate her, always stay in touch. Promises forgotten the moment they stopped being convenient. Madison gathered the letters carefully, placing them back in the shoebox with gentle reverence. These were Owen's now, his inheritance from a mother who'd left him wisdom instead of wealth. But he'd shared them with her, given her access to Sarah's private thoughts and hopes and dreams. That generosity in the face of her family's cruelty felt like a gift she didn't deserve but desperately needed. She walked out into the brutal afternoon heat. Owen stood beside the Range Rover, wiping his hands on that perpetually dirty rag. The engine hummed smoothly, all warning lights extinguished, the vehicle operating as perfectly as the day she'd driven it off the luxury dealership lot. Mass airflow sensor was fried, just like I said. Replaced it with a high-quality universal part. Works as well as the factory original, costs half as much. His voice had returned to professional neutrality, emotion locked down behind competence and expertise. The cooling hose had developed a weak spot from age and pressure. Replaced the whole section and checked the rest of the system. You shouldn't have any more problems. Madison pulled out her checkbook, the Italian leather holder embossed with her initials in gold leaf. A gift from her mother for making VP before 30. How much do I owe you for the repair? Nothing. Owen closed the hood with careful precision. This is on the house. A gift in memory of my mother. She would have wanted to help you get to your important meeting. The words hit like physical blows. After everything, after the letters and the revelations and the crying, he was still trying to honor what Sarah would have wanted, still putting Madison's needs above his own feelings, the pattern repeating across generations, the same self-sacrificing impulse that had defined Sarah's relationship with the Pierce family. No. Madison's voice came out stronger than she'd expected. I can't accept that. I won't accept that. You've already given me more than I deserve by sharing those letters. Please, let me pay you. Let me do at least this one thing right. Owen looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for sincerity. Standard rate for this repair is $300, parts and labor. $300. Madison spent more than that on a single blouse, had paid triple that for the shoes currently ruined by oil stains. The number was so absurdly small compared to what Owen had given her. The truth about Sarah, the letters, the confrontation that had shattered her carefully constructed self-image, that it felt like mockery to offer it. She wrote the check carefully, her hand shaking slightly as she filled in the amount. $500,000. $500,000. Enough to change someone's life completely. Enough to fund dreams that had been deferred for years. Not enough to compensate for what Sarah had given or what Owen had lost, but a start. Owen stared at the check like it might disappear if he looked away. I can't. This is... Miss Pierce, this is too much. Way too much. I can't possibly... It's not too much. Madison cut him off. It's not even close to enough. Your mother gave my family 27 years. She raised me and my brother. She loved us when our own parents were too busy building empires, and we never thanked her, never appreciated her, never compensated her fairly for the emotional labor of caring about children who weren't hers. Her voice grew stronger with conviction. This isn't charity. This is a tiny fraction of the debt my family owes Sarah's memory. Miss Pierce, Madison. Please. Just Madison. She held out the check. Please take it. Not for me. For her. For everything she sacrificed. For all the dreams she deferred. For the son she raised beautifully despite impossible circumstances. Owen's hand trembled as he took the check. Tears welled in his eyes again, and he didn't try to hide them this time. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Madison pulled out her phone, no longer interested in the 100 missed notifications screaming for her attention. Is there anything else? Anything you wanted to do but couldn't because of financial constraints? Dreams you had to abandon when Sarah got sick? Owen laughed, but the sound carried more pain than humor. Dreams. Yeah, I had some of those once. He looked down at the check, still processing its reality. I told you about the scholarship. Texas A&M, mechanical engineering, full ride. That was the dream. Finish the degree, become an engineer, design better vehicles, or maybe teach. Something that made a difference. Madison's fingers flew across her phone screen, pulling up information she'd reviewed 1,000 times in her corporate capacity. Pierce Automotive has an adult learner scholarship program. We partner with universities across the Southwest to help people resume interrupted educations. Full tuition, books, housing stipend, even childcare support if needed. I know about it. Owen's voice carried careful hope, fragile and afraid to solidify into belief. I looked into it a couple years ago, but I'm 38. The program prioritizes younger applicants, and I've been out of school for almost 20 years. My transcripts are ancient history. I personally approve every application that comes through. Madison met his eyes. I'm the VP who oversees the program. It's one of my primary responsibilities. And I can tell you right now that someone with your background, top academic performance, legitimate financial hardship, interrupted education due to family medical crisis, you're exactly the kind of candidate we want. Owen shook his head slowly. You don't have to do this. The money is already— This has nothing to do with the money, Madison interrupted. This has to do with the fact that Sarah worked herself to exhaustion so you could have educational opportunities she never got. This has to do with you sacrificing your scholarship to care for her when she was dying. This has to do with honoring her dreams for you by making sure they still happen, even if it's later than planned. She pulled up the application on her phone. The program explicitly welcomes non-traditional students. There's a section specifically for people resuming education after a gap. References from employers, demonstration of commitment, essay about educational goals. I can have the application sent to your email right now, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that someone with your story will be approved. Why are you doing this? Owen's question came out as whisper. After everything I said to you, after showing you how much your family hurt my mother, why would you help me? Madison looked at the garage, at the photographs visible through the office window, at the man standing before her holding a check, and a future that suddenly seemed possible. Because Sarah believed I could be a good person, because she wrote those letters hoping I'd remember who I was underneath all the corporate ambition and privilege, because I need to prove that her faith in me wasn't completely misplaced. She paused, emotions threatening to overwhelm her careful control again, and because I can't give Sarah back the years my family stole from her. I can't apologize to her or thank her or tell her I finally understand what she gave me. But I can honor her memory by making sure her son gets the opportunities she dreamed about for you. That's not charity. That's the absolute minimum I owe her. Owen looked at the check again, then at Madison, then at the garage that represented both his current life and his deferred dreams. When he spoke, his voice carried layers of emotion, grief, and hope and cautious belief in possibility. She would have liked this. Mom always believed in second chances, always said it was never too late to become who you're supposed to be. Then help me become who I'm supposed to be. Madison's voice broke slightly. Help me be the person Sarah thought I could be. Take the scholarship. Go back to school. Become the engineer she dreamed you'd be. Let her sacrifice mean something beyond grief and regret. The afternoon sun had shifted slightly, shadows growing longer across the oil-stained concrete. The heat remained oppressive, but Madison barely noticed anymore. She was too focused on Owen's face, watching him war with pride and practical need, watching him decide whether to trust the daughter of people who'd forgotten his mother so completely. Finally, he nodded, slow at first, then more certain. Okay. Yes, I'll apply. I'll go back to school if the program accepts me. He looked down at himself, at the grease-stained coveralls and oil-blackened hands. Though I have no idea how I'll manage tuition and keeping this place running, and the scholarship covers everything. Tuition, books, housing near campus, monthly living stipend. Madison was already typing notes into her phone. You could keep the garage as a weekend business if you wanted, or close it during the school year. The program is designed to eliminate financial barriers completely. No student loans, no debt, just the opportunity to learn without worrying about money. Owen laughed again, and this time the sound carried genuine amazement. Mom worked 27 years so I could go to college, and in one afternoon, you've made it possible. She would have loved the irony of that. Madison smiled, despite the tears still tracking down her face. She would have loved that you're finally getting what you earned. That's what she'd care about. Not who made it happen, but that it happened at all. She looked at her phone. 73 missed calls now. Messages from her father threatening everything from termination to disinheritance. Jennifer's texts had evolved from panic to resignation. The Japanese investors had apparently left the conference room. The deal was dead. $400 million had evaporated while she stood in a garage in West Texas, learning about the true cost of her success. And strangely, Madison felt lighter than she had in years, like a weight she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there had suddenly been lifted. The career implications would be severe. Her father would be apoplectic. The board would question her judgment. But none of that seemed to matter anymore compared to the look on Owen's face as he held the check and contemplated a future Sarah had wanted for him. Madison made a decision that would have seemed impossible 2 hours ago. She opened her father's contact, ignored the 17 missed calls from him, and typed a message. The meeting with the investors fell through due to vehicle problems in West Texas. I need to reschedule for next month. Something more important came up that required immediate attention. I'll explain when I get back. She hit send before she could reconsider, watching the message turn from sending to delivered to read. The response came within seconds, just a single word: unacceptable. Too bad. For 28 years, Madison had lived by her father's definition of acceptable, building a life and career designed to earn his approval. And in the process, she'd become someone who could forget Sarah Carter. Someone who measured worth by profit margins and status symbols. Someone who'd abandoned every value Sarah had tried to preserve in her through those unread letters. Madison looked at Owen, at the garage, at the box of letters still sitting on the office desk. Then she looked at the Range Rover, perfectly repaired, ready to take her back to Houston and boardrooms and a life that suddenly felt hollow and meaningless. Can I ask you something? The question came before she'd fully formed it. Tell me more about her, about Sarah. Not just the big things, but the details. What made her laugh? What was she afraid of? What did she love beyond me and Christopher and you? I realize I knew her for 27 years, but never really knew her at all. Owen glanced at his watch. Ancient, scratched, probably a flea market find, then back at Madison. You're not going to make your meeting, are you? The meeting's already dead. My career might be too, depending on how much damage control I can manage later. Madison surprised herself with how little panic accompanied that statement. Right now, I'd rather spend time learning about the woman who loved me better than my own mother ever did. If you're willing to share, I know I have no right to ask for more than you've already given me. Owen was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he gestured back toward the office. Come on, I've got old photo albums Mom kept, stories I can tell you. It won't bring her back, but maybe it'll help you understand who she really was. Madison followed him into the cramped office space, leaving the Range Rover running because turning it off felt like committing fully to a decision she was still processing. But with each step away from the vehicle and toward Owen's memories of Sarah, the decision felt less reckless and more necessary, more like the first right choice she'd made in years. And in a garage office in the middle of the West Texas desert, surrounded by photographs and memories and the lingering presence of a woman who'd died believing Madison could be good, something fundamental shifted in Madison Pierce's understanding of what mattered in life. 3 months later, Madison stood in Houston Memorial Gardens under a December sky that threatened rain without quite committing to it. Gray clouds hung low and heavy, appropriate for the occasion. Owen stood beside her, dressed in clean jeans and a button-down shirt that still carried creases from the package, new clothes purchased for new beginnings, not funerals revisited. But today demanded presence at this place, this marker of loss that Madison had never visited before, despite 3 years of opportunities. The headstone she'd commissioned had been installed last week. Pink marble, Sarah's favorite color according to Owen, imported from a quarry in Vermont. The inscription had taken Madison 2 weeks to compose, cycling through dozens of drafts before settling on words that felt remotely adequate. Sarah Carter, 1955 to 2021. Mother to many, angel to all who knew her. Her love made us better than we were. Fresh flowers surrounded the stone, arrangements Madison had ordered on standing delivery. Every week, without fail, a local florist would place new blooms here. Roses in summer, chrysanthemums in fall, poinsettias for Christmas. An inadequate gesture, but consistency mattered. Sarah had valued reliability above grand gestures. I think she would have liked this. Madison's voice came out quieter than she'd intended, almost swallowed by the whisper of wind through the cemetery's oak trees. She would have told you it was too expensive. Owen's reply carried gentle humor. Would have said you should have spent the money on something practical. But yeah, she would have secretly loved it. Madison knelt, placing her own bouquet, white lilies and baby's breath, simple and elegant, at the base of the headstone. Her knees pressed into damp grass, probably staining her pants, but she didn't care anymore about such things. 3 months of systematic life deconstruction had eliminated concern for designer clothes and pristine appearance. The deconstruction had started that afternoon in Owen's garage, continued through a brutal confrontation with her father, and accelerated through decisions that looked increasingly like career suicide to everyone who'd known the old Madison Pierce. She'd resigned as VP of Business Development 2 weeks after the missed meeting with the Japanese investors. Not fired. Her father had wanted to fire her, but the board had convinced him that forcing out a Pierce family member would create worse optics than accepting her resignation. The resignation letter had been direct. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down from my position as Vice President of Business Development at Pierce Automotive International. I've spent the past decade building a career at the expense of building a life. That ends now. I'm pursuing work that aligns with my values rather than my ambition. Thank you for the opportunity to serve this company. I hope my successor brings you the dedication you deserve. Her father hadn't spoken to her since. Her mother had called once, voice tight with disappointment, asking what had possessed Madison to throw away everything they'd built for her. Christopher, her older brother, had sent a single text. Mom and Dad will get over it eventually. Probably. Good luck with whatever comes next. What came next was selling her penthouse. The $4 million monument to success she'd purchased at 26 had gone on the market at a price designed to move quickly. She'd accepted an offer of $3.8 million within a week, signed papers without negotiating, and transferred the entire amount minus realtor fees to a new account she'd established specifically for the purpose now consuming her waking hours. Her new apartment was a 2-bedroom in a middle-income neighborhood, $1,200 a month, with functioning appliances and no view to speak of. The transition from 4,000 square feet of luxury to 900 square feet of adequate had been jarring, but also freeing in ways Madison hadn't anticipated. Less space meant less stuff, meant less maintenance, meant less time spent managing possessions, and more time for work that mattered. The work had crystallized during late-night conversations with Owen, both of them processing Sarah's death and legacy. Madison had arrived at a conclusion that felt both obvious and revolutionary. The best way to honor Sarah's memory was ensuring other people like her, domestic workers, service employees, people who sacrificed everything for their children's futures, had better options for those children. The Sarah Carter Educational Foundation had been established with the $3.5 million from the penthouse sale as seed funding. Madison had spent 8 weeks navigating nonprofit incorporation, hiring staff who knew what they were doing, and building partnerships with universities across Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and Oklahoma. The foundation's mission was surgical in its specificity: full scholarship support for children of domestic workers and service industry employees who demonstrated academic potential regardless of test scores or traditional metrics. Owen had helped her design the application process, drawing on his own experiences and his mother's stories. No essays about overcoming adversity that forced applicants to perform their trauma for evaluation committees. No requirement for teacher recommendations, since many applicants attended under-resourced schools. Instead, a simple form asking about family employment history, educational goals, and what support they needed beyond tuition. References from anyone who knew the applicant well: employers, clergy, coaches, neighbors. The assumption built into every aspect of the process was that applicants were worthy. The foundation's job was removing barriers, not creating new ones. The first application cycle had closed yesterday. 847 applications for 100 scholarship positions. Madison had read every single application personally, working 16-hour days in the foundation's modest office space. Each application represented dreams deferred, potential waiting to bloom, families making impossible sacrifices in hope of better futures. Owen shifted beside her, drawing Madison's attention back to the present. "You doing okay? I know today's heavy." "I'm okay." Madison stood, brushing grass from her knees with hands that no longer sported professional manicures. Her nails were short and unpolished now, practical for the work that increasingly involved moving boxes and organizing events rather than attending board meetings. "Just thinking about how much has changed, how different everything looks from 3 months ago." "You've built something incredible." Owen's voice carried pride that still surprised Madison when she heard it. "Mom would have been so proud of the foundation, of you, of who you've become." The foundation wasn't Madison's only project. She'd also expanded Pierce Automotive's Adult Learner Scholarship program, quadrupling its budget by redirecting funds from her former department's entertainment and client hospitality budgets. Her replacement as VP had protested, arguing that customer relationship investments were essential. Madison had presented data showing the scholarship program generated more positive press and community goodwill than any client dinner ever had. The board had sided with the data. Owen had been the program's first new recipient under the expanded criteria. He'd enrolled at Texas A&M's satellite campus in Houston for the spring semester, starting January 15th. Mechanical engineering, picking up where he'd left off 20 years ago. The program covered everything: tuition, books, a small apartment near campus, monthly stipend for expenses. He'd sold the garage to a young mechanic he'd been mentoring, ensuring the business would continue serving the community while freeing himself to focus on education. "Have you finished your course selection?" Madison asked, eager to shift conversation toward futures rather than dwelling in grief. "Registered for 15 hours. Calculus, physics, introduction to mechanical systems, technical writing, and a freshman seminar on engineering ethics." Owen rattled off the schedule with mix of excitement and terror. "It's going to be brutal after 20 years away from classrooms, but I'm ready, I think." "You'll do great. You've always been brilliant. Sarah talked about it in the letters. How quick you were with numbers, how you understood systems intuitively." Madison paused. "And you'll have support. Tutoring services, study groups, whatever you need." They stood in silence for several minutes, each processing private thoughts. Madison's mind wandered to the selection committee meeting scheduled for tomorrow. 100 scholarships for 847 applicants meant devastating 747 families with rejection letters. The mathematics of scarcity haunted her. Among the applications, 3 had stopped Madison's breath entirely when she'd read them. Maria Santos, 17, daughter of hotel housekeepers in San Antonio, worked 20 hours weekly at Walmart while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. Wanted to study civil engineering, design affordable housing for communities like the one she'd grown up in. Her essay, despite Madison's efforts to make essays optional, many applicants included them anyway, described watching her mother's hands crack and bleed from industrial cleaning chemicals. I want to build structures that last as long as my mother's love. I want to create homes for people who clean other people's homes but can't afford their own. James Wilson, 45, single father and elementary school janitor in El Paso. His daughter had cerebral palsy requiring round-the-clock care his minimum wage barely covered. He'd been accepted to University of Texas El Paso's special education teaching program 15 years ago but couldn't afford to attend while supporting his child. Now, with his daughter 18 and more independent, he wanted to finally pursue the degree. I've spent every day for 15 years watching teachers work with my daughter, watching them change her life through patience and skill and love. I want to be that person for other families who feel as lost as I did when the diagnosis came. Keisha Robinson, 22, daughter of a nanny who'd raised 3 different families' children over 30 years while Keisha grew up with her grandmother. Currently enrolled at community college studying nursing but running out of money, facing dropout. Dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse practitioner specializing in underserved communities. My mother gave her heart to children whose parents could afford to pay someone to love their kids. I want to give my skills to children whose parents can't afford health care. I want to complete the circle. Madison had flagged all 3 applications immediately, marking them as priority approvals, then felt guilty for letting personal resonance override objective evaluation. Then realized objective evaluation was a myth anyway. Every selection involved subjective judgment about whose dreams deserved funding. At least her subjectivity was honest about its biases. The selection committee consisted of Madison, Owen, 2 university admissions counselors she'd hired as consultants, and a retired teacher who'd spent 40 years working in Title I in schools. They'd spent the past week reviewing applications and marathon sessions, developing shared criteria that balanced need, potential, and practical considerations about which students were most likely to succeed given proper support. Tomorrow, they'd make final decisions. Tomorrow, 100 families would receive life-changing news while 747 received apologies and encouragement to apply again next year. The emotional weight of that responsibility sat heavy in Madison's chest. "You're thinking about the selection meeting." Owen read her expression accurately, learned skill from months of working closely together on foundation business. "How do we choose?" Madison's question came out raw. Every application represents someone like Sarah. Someone sacrificing everything for their kids' futures. Someone who deserves better than the hand they've been dealt. How do we decide who gets help and who gets told to wait another year? We do our best. We trust our process. We remember that helping 100 people is better than helping 0 people, even if we can't help everyone. Owen's response carried hard-won wisdom. Mom used to say that guilt about what you can't do shouldn't stop you from doing what you can. That perfect is the enemy of good enough. Madison nodded, though the philosophy didn't quite ease the burden. She looked at Sarah's headstone again, at the inscription she'd agonized over. "Do you think she'd forgive me? For forgetting her, for being so wrapped up in my own ambition that I didn't even notice when she disappeared from my life?" "She forgave you before you even knew you needed forgiveness." Owen's certainty was absolute. That's who she was. She loved people not because they deserved it, but because she chose to. She saw the best in everyone, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. A light rain began falling, gentle mist rather than proper droplets. Madison tilted her face upward, letting the moisture cool her skin. The weather matched her mood, somber but not quite despairing, acknowledging loss while allowing space for hope. "We should go." Owen touched her shoulder gently. "Selection meeting's at 8 tomorrow morning. You need sleep." Madison took one last look at the headstone before turning away. "Thank you for doing this with me, for not hating me despite having every right to." "I never hated you." Owen's voice was soft. "I hated the situation, hated the unfairness, hated that Mom gave so much to people who gave back so little. But you were a kid when she started working for your family. Then you were a teenager, then a young adult being shaped by forces bigger than yourself. You made mistakes. You're fixing them. That's more than most people ever do." They walked through the cemetery together, past rows of headstones marking lives lived and lost. Madison thought about legacy, about what people left behind beyond money and property. Sarah had left letters and memories and a son who'd become a good man despite impossible circumstances. What would Madison leave? Until 3 months ago, probably just a corporate biography in industry publications and a bank account her nieces and nephews would eventually inherit. Now, maybe something more. The foundation would outlive her. The scholarships would continue funding dreams long after Madison was dust. Students like Maria and James and Keisha would build careers and raise families and create ripples extending far beyond what Madison could see from this moment. That felt like legacy worth leaving. The drive back to her apartment took 20 minutes through Houston's early evening traffic. Owen had his own apartment now, near the Texas A&M campus, but he'd driven to the cemetery separately since he had dinner plans with friends from his new cohort of engineering students. Madison was learning to be alone without being lonely, finding satisfaction in solitary evenings spent reading applications and planning foundation expansion. Her apartment complex was nothing special. Standard 3-story building, parking lot, small pool nobody used in December, but it was hers, paid for with money she earned rather than inherited. The distinction mattered more than she'd expected. This space represented independence from family wealth and corporate identity. Here she was just Madison, not Madison Pierce of Pierce Automotive International. Inside, the apartment showed signs of her new life. Foundation files covered the dining table she used as a desk. Textbooks on nonprofit management and philanthropic strategy lined makeshift shelves. Photos she'd printed from Sarah's collection decorated the walls. Sarah with young Owen, Sarah on her single days off, Sarah smiling in ways Madison had never witnessed during work hours. Each photo was a reminder of what mattered, of why the foundation existed. Madison made herself simple dinner, pasta with vegetables, nothing fancy, and settled at her desk table to review the applications one more time before tomorrow's meeting. She'd already read them each at least twice, made detailed notes, developed preliminary rankings. But the weight of tomorrow's decisions demanded one more pass. Maria Santos's application sat on top of the pile. Madison read the essay again, struck anew by the maturity and clarity of vision. This 17-year-old had already figured out what Madison had taken 28 years to learn, that success meant using your skills to lift others, not just yourself. Her phone rang. Jennifer, her former assistant who'd somehow remained loyal despite Madison's career implosion. "Hey, just checking in. How was the cemetery visit?" "Heavy. Good. Necessary." Madison cradled the phone against her shoulder while taking notes. "Owen and I are both doing okay, considering." "And the selection meeting tomorrow?" "Terrifying. We're choosing futures. That's a lot of power for imperfect people to wield." Madison set down her pen. "What if we get it wrong? What if we fund someone who drops out while rejecting someone who would have thrived? Then you learn and adjust for next year. Jennifer's practicality had always been grounding. This is your first cycle. You'll get better at evaluation as you gain experience. And honestly, I've seen your notes on these applications. You're being incredibly thoughtful. These kids are lucky to have someone who actually cares, rather than just processing paperwork. They talked for another 20 minutes, Jennifer updating Madison on foundation logistics and upcoming events. The first annual scholarship ceremony was scheduled for late January, when they'd bring all 100 recipients to Houston for a weekend of orientation, mentorship matching, and celebration. Madison had insisted on ceremony. These students deserved recognition, deserved to be honored publicly, deserved to understand they were joining a community rather than just receiving money. After hanging up, Madison returned to applications, James Wilson's file next. The man was 45 years old, had been dreaming of teaching for 15 years while working as a janitor and caring for his disabled daughter. The scholarship would cover everything: tuition at UT El Paso, books, housing, living expenses. He'd be able to focus entirely on his education without worrying about how to pay bills while attending classes. Madison imagined him in a classroom, finally achieving the dream he'd deferred for a decade and a half. Imagined him working with special needs children, drawing on his years of experience advocating for his own daughter. The investment of scholarship money would return to communities exponentially through the students he'd teach over his career. Every application told similar stories with different details. Single mothers working 3 jobs while studying nursing. Former foster youth aging out of the system with nowhere to go but determination to build better lives. Immigrants' children navigating cultural expectations and financial limitations. Disabled students needing accommodations that traditional scholarships didn't consider. Every single applicant deserved support. Madison worked until midnight, finalizing her recommendations for tomorrow's committee discussion. She'd identified her definite yes votes, 100 applications she believed deserved funding without qualification. Another 100 were strong maybes requiring more debate. The remaining 647 ranged from solid candidates with small concerns to applicants who clearly needed support but might not be quite ready for university-level academics. That last category haunted her most. Students with potential but gaps in preparation through no fault of their own. Students attending failing schools that hadn't equipped them properly. Students whose family chaos made consistent studying impossible. All the structural inequalities that made poverty a trap rather than merely a circumstance. The foundation couldn't fix systemic problems, but it could help individuals escape them. And maybe, over time, enough individual escapes would add up to systemic change. That was the hope anyway. Madison finally climbed into bed around 1 in the morning, setting her alarm for 6 to allow preparation time before the 8 o'clock meeting. Sleep came fitfully, dreams populated by 847 faces asking why they weren't chosen, demanding justification for decisions that would alter their life trajectories. The alarm felt brutal after 5 hours of restless sleep. Madison dragged herself to the shower, standing under hot water until it ran lukewarm and her brain started functioning. Coffee helped marginally. The drive to the foundation office through early morning Houston traffic gave her time to mentally rehearse arguments for her top choices. The foundation occupied modest space in a mid-rise office building, 2,000 square feet that felt luxurious compared to where they'd started. Conference room with a table that seated 8, small kitchen, individual offices for Madison and the 2 full-time staff members she'd hired, reception area that currently stood empty. Hiring a receptionist was next quarter's goal. Owen arrived 10 minutes before the meeting, carrying a box of kolaches from a Czech bakery near his apartment. Figured we'd need fuel for tough decisions. The other committee members arrived promptly at 8. Dr. Patricia Reeves, retired teacher with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Marcus Chen and Angela Washington, university admissions counselors who'd seen thousands of applications and developed instincts for identifying students who'd thrive given proper support. Madison had printed packets for everyone, summary sheets for each of the 847 applications, organized by her preliminary ranking, 300 pages of condensed dreams and circumstances. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the emotional difficulty of what we're about to do, Madison addressed the group as they settled around the conference table. We're going to fund 100 students and reject 747. That means 747 families getting letters that say, not this year, maybe next year. Some of those families won't apply again. Some won't be in circumstances to wait. Our decisions have real consequences. Dr. Reeves nodded gravely. I've been part of selection committees before. It never gets easier. But remember, we're making 100 lives significantly better. That's 100 more than if we'd done nothing. They worked methodically through Madison's rankings, starting with her definite yes votes. The committee challenged some of her choices, asking questions that forced Madison to defend or reconsider her reasoning. Maria Santos was approved unanimously within 5 minutes. Her application was too strong to dispute. James Wilson generated more debate, with Marcus expressing concern about whether a 45-year-old with a 15-year gap could handle university coursework. Madison had countered with data about adult learner success rates, and James's demonstrated commitment through years of working while raising his daughter alone. Owen's quiet testimony about his own experience returning to school after 20 years proved decisive. Keisha Robinson's application sparked the most intense discussion. Angela worried that funding a student already enrolled in community college might be less impactful than funding someone with no access to higher education at all. Madison argued that preventing dropout was as important as enabling enrollment. Dr. Reeves pointed out that nursing programs had high attrition rates, and Keisha had already demonstrated commitment by persisting through community college despite financial hardship. After 30 minutes of debate, they approved her scholarship. The process continued through lunch, sandwiches delivered and consumed while reviewing files, and into the afternoon. By 4 o'clock, they'd approved 90 students unanimously and identified 20 strong candidates for the remaining 10 slots. The debates grew more granular, parsing small differences between excellent applicants. A 17-year-old from rural New Mexico who'd taught himself calculus from YouTube videos versus a 19-year-old from Houston who'd spent 2 years working to save money for college. Both deserved support. Only one could receive it. Madison felt each rejection as personal failure, even knowing the mathematics made it impossible to fund everyone. These weren't just applications. They were Sarah. Every single one was someone like Sarah, sacrificing and struggling and hoping for better. The sun had set by the time they finalized all 100 selections. Madison's head pounded from hours of concentration and emotional strain. But they'd done it. 100 scholarship recipients chosen through careful deliberation and sincere effort to evaluate fairly. I know this was exhausting. Madison addressed the committee as they gathered materials. But thank you. Thank you for taking this seriously, for caring about these students, for helping me honor Sarah's memory properly. Dr. Reeves touched Madison's hand gently. Your mother would be very proud. Not your birth mother, the one who raised you. Sarah. She'd be so proud of this work. The words hit harder than expected, bringing tears Madison had been holding back all day. I hope so. I really hope so. After everyone left, Madison sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by application files. Tomorrow she'd begin the notification process. Acceptance letters first, delivered via phone calls to make the moment special. Then rejection letters, crafted carefully to encourage rather than crush. But tonight, she just needed to sit with the weight of what they'd done. Her phone buzzed. Text from Owen. You did good today. Mom would have loved seeing you like this. Fully present, fully caring, fully yourself. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we change 100 lives. Madison smiled through her tears. Tomorrow, they'd change lives. But the process had already changed hers. 3 months ago, she'd been a corporate VP measuring worth in profit margins and deal sizes. Now she was someone who spent 12 hours debating whether a rural student with home-taught calculus deserved funding slightly more than an urban student with work experience and savings. The transformation wasn't complete. Madison still caught herself falling into old patterns, prioritizing efficiency over empathy, focusing on metrics over meaning. But she was learning. Slowly, painfully, learning to see people rather than assets, learning to value stories over statistics, learning to become the person Sarah had believed she could be. The foundation office had a small window overlooking Houston's downtown skyline. Madison stood there watching city lights flicker to life as darkness settled. Somewhere out there, 100 families were going about their evenings unaware that tomorrow would bring news changing everything. And 747 families were similarly unaware that their hopes would be redirected toward next year. She thought about Sarah standing at windows in the Pierce family home, looking out while Madison slept safely in her bedroom. Wondered what Sarah had thought about during those quiet moments, whether she'd questioned her choices, mourned her deferred dreams, resented the children who got her daily presents while Owen waited hundreds of miles away. The letter suggested Sarah had found peace with her decisions, had chosen to see meaning in sacrifice rather than tragedy in missed opportunities, had believed that loving Madison and Christopher was worthwhile even when that love wasn't adequately returned. Madison couldn't change the past, couldn't bring Sarah back or thank her properly or make up for years of thoughtless neglect. But she could live forward in ways that honored Sarah's memory, could build systems ensuring other people like Sarah had better options, could fund education for students like Owen so they wouldn't have to choose between dreams and family obligations. It wasn't enough, would never be enough. But it was something. And something, as Sarah had apparently told Owen repeatedly, was infinitely better than nothing. Madison locked the office and drove home through nighttime traffic, mind already shifting to tomorrow's tasks. Phone calls to scholarship recipients, press release announcing the first cohort. Planning for the January ceremony. Developing support systems for students once they enrolled. The work was endless, overwhelming, utterly consuming. And Madison had never felt more alive. At home, she poured wine and opened her laptop to draft the acceptance phone script. She wanted the calls to feel personal, warm, celebratory, wanted each recipient to understand they weren't just getting money, they were joining a community, becoming part of Sarah's legacy, stepping into futures their families had sacrificed to make possible. Hello? Is this Maria Santos? The imagined conversation played in Madison's head. This is Madison Pierce from the Sarah Carter Educational Foundation. I'm calling with wonderful news. Maria, you've been selected as one of our inaugural scholarship recipients. Your dream of studying civil engineering is going to happen. We're going to make sure of it. She could picture Maria's reaction, the disbelief, the joy, the relief. Could imagine her telling her parents, their hands still cracked from cleaning chemicals, that their daughter was going to college fully funded, that their sacrifices had mattered, that their work had built a foundation for their child's different future. Those moments, those phone calls tomorrow, would make every difficult hour worthwhile, would justify the career Madison had walked away from and the relationship with her father she'd probably damaged beyond repair, would prove that Sarah's faith in her hadn't been entirely misplaced. Madison worked until past midnight again, perfecting scripts and reviewing logistics. When she finally slept, her dreams were gentler than the previous night. Sarah appeared in one, not speaking, just smiling in that way the photographs had captured. Approval radiating from her expression, pride evident in her eyes. Madison woke feeling like she'd received a benediction. Like some part of Sarah's spirit had reached across the divide between living and dead to offer forgiveness and encouragement. Probably just wishful thinking translated into dream imagery. But the feeling persisted through her morning routine, through the drive to the office, through preparation for the day's phone calls. At 9 o'clock precisely, with Owen sitting beside her for moral support, Madison dialed the first number. Maria Santos, about to receive news that would alter her family's trajectory for generations. 3 rings. Then a young voice, slightly breathless. Hello? Hello, is this Maria Santos? Yes, this is Maria. Madison smiled, feeling Sarah's presence in the moment. Maria, this is Madison Pierce from the Sarah Carter Educational Foundation. I'm calling with wonderful news. She paused, savoring the anticipation. Maria, you've been selected as one of our inaugural scholarship recipients. Congratulations. We're going to help make your dreams come true. The scream of joy that came through the phone made Madison laugh and cry simultaneously. Owen squeezed her shoulder, his own eyes wet, and in that moment, Madison understood viscerally what Sarah had known all along, that legacy wasn't measured in corporate achievements or accumulated wealth. It was measured in lives touched, dreams enabled, futures made possible through the simple act of caring about someone else's success as much as your own. 1 phone call down, 99 to go. And then the real work would begin, supporting these students through their educational journeys, building systems to help them thrive, expanding the foundation to serve more families next year and the year after and the year after that. Sarah Carter had spent 27 years loving children who weren't biologically hers, sacrificing her own son's daily presence to provide him a future, believing that kindness and service mattered more than status or wealth. She died believing Madison could be good. Madison was finally 3 months too late and 3 years after Sarah's death, proving her right.